All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, per usual. What do we got on the agenda today? Couple of ESPN Plus cards. Look, I know them. There are some MMA related podcasts and content and whatnot that have very consistent numbers. You'll see spikes for bigger events, but man, for these smaller cards, mine, and I don't say this to complain, even a little bit. But I can look at the numbers and very easily tell, even if I couldn't see the titles of episodes, like, oh, that one definitely was attached to a bigger event, and here's the string of ESPN Plus cards that no one cares about. So, completely understandable. I am not going to complain about it. I am just making a note. All right, so we got a review UFC on ESPN Plus 103. Excuse me, 104. Preview of UFC on ESPN Plus 105. And we're back in the warehouse for that one. And you can tell because Neil Magny's in the main event. And you would never put that in any kind of venue where you had to actually sell tickets. I don't say that to try and, throw a bunch of shade at Neil Magny. He's been around for a long time, and I respect his career. I really do. But Neil Magny main eventing in 2024 is a byproduct of the UFC not caring if anyone watches. It's really how that breaks down. I like Carlos Prates. I don't even think that's a bad fight. I think it's a very bad main event. But that's a distinction that is rapidly losing all that much significance. Anyway, full preview of that. Little bit of news. UFC 310 starting to be in a little bit of trouble. A couple of fight announcements, stuff like that. So, any way you can interact with the product as we get going here, like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review, sharing around on your social media platform of choice, y'all know the drill. Alright, let's jump into this, shall we? UFC on ESPN Plus 104 from Rogers Place in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. We had our first event using the new version of the unified rules of MMA. So the 12 to 6 elbow was legal and made a few appearances. And your hands are no longer a component for determining if you are downed. An elbow will still get you down, but just the hands don't matter at all. And we did see a couple of times people being tripoded or quad-potted along the fence, knee in the head, immediately drops to one knee, going, okay, nope, you're not going to knee me again. Well, not in the head at least. So started to make some appearances. That ultimately, those shifts in rules lead to relatively minor fight adjustments. It's more an administrative thing or an officiating thing. It makes the ref's job easier and kind of takes them out of the equation a little bit more. It's not neither of those are giant game changer rules as far as how fights will play out all that often or how the meta evolves. I think at this point, the only thing you could do to really shift mainstream MMA meta is to legalize kicks or knees to the head of a downed opponent. But they're not really going to go for that. So until then, this is what we got. And frankly, I think both of these are good updates. So thumbs up there. On the old prediction tracker, I only changed my mind on one thing. Because a couple of days after the podcast, Pedro Munoz started making noise about how near he is to the end of his career. And I don't like that kind of talk from fighters. And I double checked, and he's almost 40. And he's not just almost 4. I mean, Ayman Zahabi is no spring chicken, but Munoz is like 38, almost 39, and has had a extraordinarily long career. And if you just look, they've listed on the broadcast like some of the list of guys he's fought, and it's pretty ridiculous. And he's had a few wars here and there. Like the mileage adds up on that guy in addition to him being a little bit older. So that one I switched. What was it? Didn't change whether or not I would have gone positive or negative. It did shift me one more in the positive section, but uh, and I would have. A friend of mine said, if you're gonna change your mind on a few of these things, you should, put out a post. It's not a bad idea, and I really should be better about that, but Saturday was a little bit crazy for me. I missed the first couple of fights live. They're in the full report because I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I had that mild epiphany as the event had concluded, and I scrolled back on the video player to find the first 2 2/3 fights because that's what I missed due to other commitments. And I'm sitting there watching these, and they're not great fights. They're not awful, but they're not great. And I'm typing things up, and I'm tired, and my body hurts because I spent 6 hours engaged in strenuous physical activity. So I'm tired. These are not scintillating fights. The whole event is, I believe, the UFC stat guy put out there that it's the third longest event in UFC history. I think they only track cage time though, for that stat. So that stat came in like 3 hours and 4 minutes, give or take, something like that. A little over 3 hours. And here's the thing. I know it only tracks fight time. I don't actually know if that counts the minute between rounds. Because if it does, then we have to add a little bit more to the equation, obviously. And it doesn't count broadcast time. Now, I don't know that this was the longest broadcast from start to finish. I mentioned already I missed the first 2 and change, right? But even after that, we not only had a lot of decisions. They lost a fight. We lost Derek Lewis and Jonata Denise. Some medical issue with Derek Lewis. Hope he recovers. Hope it's not serious. But we lost a fight, and it still just went long, man. A long fight. It was just a long night. The final, like, will they show me that if I look that up? Hang on. Let me check. Okay, that's the main card. So just the main card. Let's see if they'll show it. Okay, so the main card is 3 hours and 41 minutes. Um, that's of broadcast time. That's what the player says, right? Almost 4 hours for that, and then that was 341. How about the prelims? You gonna show me those? Um, that's the post show. That is them trying to break down individual fights. Hang on. I bet they don't just have it. Oh, nope, there it is. All right, hang on. So 341 for the main and 301 for the prelim. So 6:45, probably if we really did some math on that. You're just shy of 7 hours of broadcast time for this card. This was a slog. It just was, and bless Brandon Moreno for the main event. That's all I'm saying about that. And look, some of it I get is not necessarily the UFC's fault, but there were, what, 13 fights. It would have been 14 with if the Lewis fight had stuck around. And you had 4 finishes. And you know what? I'm a little bit tired of pretending the UFC isn't at least partially to blame for this. I mean, some of these were eminently predictable to go the distance. Main event, I'll give a little bit of a pass because Brandon Moreno tried. It's not like Albazi was a punching bag either. Like, those two went after it a little bit, so. But Rose Namajunas, and the last time Rose finished a fight? Because I'm not saying she never has, but. Okay, Rose hasn't finished a fight since she knocked out Zhang Weili in 21. It's been nothing but even that, right? That was her first finish since. So her reputation as a finisher comes mostly from her early UFC fights, when she choked out Angela Hill, choked out Paige Van Zandt, then decision, lost decision, submitted Michelle Waterson, stopped Joanna, decision in the rematch with Joanna, knocked out by Andrade, decision Andrade in the rematch, which was a little bit later, knocks out Zhang, loses to Zhang via decision. Esparza goes the distance. Fior goes the distance. Hebos goes the distance. Cortez goes the distance. That was and Erin Blanchfield she had a fair number of finishes earlier in her career, but even then, she's much more of a decision fighter. Um, it's not impossible for her to get finishes. I mean, saying that she is incapable would be a gross overstatement, but that's the kind of fight that's going to go the distance. You had a crappy light heavyweight fight that I'm sure somebody not paying too much attention might go, well, somebody will get knocked out, right? Nope, not really. A bunch of stuff on the prelims went the distance. I mean, I'll spoil something I usually talk about at the end. There was no fight of the night. And so they just threw a performance bonus at everyone who got a finish because there were only 4. So the same number of bonuses were handed out. Just now, as mentioned, third longest in terms of in-cage time. This is among the longer broadcasts, would be my hunch. So it was just a slog, man. I don't have any other way to put that. It was just long. I don't. I'm going to mention something that helped things take a while, but I don't. Under the circumstances, I don't begrudge it. I'm just acknowledging it. Um, they took time out of the broadcast to talk about 2 UFC production members who recently passed away. Neither of whom was very old. One of them was like my age. And they took time to sort of memorialize them on screen. The commentary team talked about them and got a little bit emotional. So these were clearly people that were well thought of. And other people in the MMA community, especially the media side of things, have been, when they heard about it, like started putting out that, condolences and whatnot. So I am not complaining about that use of airtime. That would be a little bit selfish, and that's not what that is not the kind of thing I ever complain about unless it gets really ridiculous, and this wasn't. But it's just, again, to note, there was stuff that just made this take a long time. And the main card was pretty badly paced. Um, it was just kind of a rough night. That's the long and the short of that. So anyway, that was only the one. But as I'm sitting there, like after quite a while of this, after having been awake for far too long by that point, um, just editing in these very uneventful results, round by round scoring for preliminary fights on a card that no one's gonna read my report on anyway. I had this like, what are you doing with your life, man? Here you are, just That's just kind of where I landed on that. So there's that. So that was the only change. If the judges had got it right, I still would have been 7-6. There's another fight earlier in the card that I'm not calling robbery, but I don't think was scored correctly. So what am I annoyed that I got wrong? I'll stand by picking Henry over Jordan. I wasn't sure about Jordan at bantamweight. He actually looked pretty good in that weight class. I should have picked Romanov over Nascimento. Nascimento's not very good. Um, I probably no, that one was kind of a coin flip. The Romanov one, I think, is the only one that really kind of stands out. Like Hibario over Machado is whatever. Stoltzfus over Barrio. That I think I need to reevaluate Stoltzfus. I have a very warped perspective on him that kind of came back to bite me here. Um, yeah, really, I think it's just I should have got Romanov right. Like Nascimento's not the guy who's going to make him fight in a way where he's going to gas out, and Nascimento's not very good. Okay, so 8-5. Let me double check that real fast. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Did I miscount? Hang on. 8-5 is 13. There were 13 fights. What am I? Hang on. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. All right. Moreno, Blanchfield. That didn't happen. Hibario, Stoltz. So 1, 2, 3, 4. What the heck is wrong with my eyes or my math? Because let me do this. Hang on. So Machado and Hibario, Stoltzfus, Jordan, Romanov. Oh, yeah, sorry. And Horth and Petrovic. Okay, I can't count. It's late, guys. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, 8-5. So year to date, 312 and 135. I can live with that. So, um, I hope this doesn't take very long. Main event: Brandon Moreno with a truly wonderful performance defeats Amir Albazi. Unanimous decision, 250-45s and a 49-46. I don't know which round that judge gave to Albazi, and I'm not going to bother looking it up because I don't care that much. What was it? Maybe the fourth was the closest. I still don't think Albazi won. I don't think he won a round. Nice jab from Moreno. Pretty good pressure. Albazi's defense just a little bit of a problem. Albazi's offense severely muted. He only got like one takedown and couldn't get any control. And if he can't get control of you, then he doesn't have much of a game. He landed a few punches, but nothing nearly as substantial as what Moreno landed. Moreno's his offensive output in this fight finally got him past Demetrius Johnson for most significant strikes landed in flyweight history. So really solid offensive display from Moreno from start to finish. Good defense, good offense. Not perfect, but really good. Nice return to form for the former champion. Big thumbs up for me on Moreno here. He did really good. Setback for Albazi, but he also was making his first return after some health scares. He had neck surgery and he had heart surgery. So him being a little bit rusty, and even at his best, I think this is a really tough fight for him. Moreno's just a tough style matchup for a lot of people. So the top of flyweight suddenly looking a little bit crowded. Not in a bad way. We've got Pantoja and Asakura coming up. We got Brandon Royval in the mix. Moreno's back in the mix. Can I tell you, after several years of listening to this chant, it was a little bit odd to hear a genuine "Let's go Brandon" chant. A little bit weird. But I'm happy for us all to move past that particular bit of crowd chicanery. Not that there weren't more than a few politically charged bits of chanting from this crowd, but that one in particular it seems to have been retired as a comment from. I don't know. Maybe it's different. It'll be different in America, but in Canada, they just gave them a genuine, honest "Let's go Brandon" chant for Brandon Moreno. So he turned in a really good performance. We got to wait to see what happens with Pantoja and Asakura before we can really kind of sort out the top of this division. You got Manel Kopp floating around. I already mentioned a few of the others. The division's in kind of a healthy place right now, so we will see what happens in the future with that. Tough loss for Albazi, but he can pretty easily get booked against someone else in the top 10 and see if he can get back on track. I don't think this was a career-altering beating, but he took some damage. Co-main event, Aaron Blanchfield defeated Rose Namajunas via unanimous decision, 48-47 across the boards. Rose had a good first two rounds. I imagine I got rounds 4 and 2 backwards from a lot of people. Was it 2 or was it 1? Might have been the first that I actually gave to Blanchfield. I don't know. I gave one of those two to Blanchfield and I gave the fourth to Namajunas, which I think on further reflection, I'm pretty sure I got that wrong live. Rose wins the second fairly easily. First two rounds are pretty good from Rose. She's moving pretty well. She's landing decent punches, avoiding a lot of Blanchfield's game, but Blanchfield just keeps getting to us. Third round starts getting to her. Gets some takedowns, works top position, has decent ground and pound going. Rose's bottom game at this point seems to consist of grabbing on and waiting for the ref to intervene. That's all she was doing here, and maybe that's just because of how good Blanchfield is on top. I'm sure that's a component, but not a great sign. Fourth round was almost all on the feet, but Rose's offense seems to have slowed significantly by this point. Live, I thought she won that one, but as I mentioned, I think I got that wrong. And then the fifth round is very easily Blanchfield's. Good pressure, gets a takedown, a lot of top work and control, and not even in a like hugely boring way. Not the most scintillating performance, but a very solid performance, especially after she dropped the first two to come back and win the next three. Like that, I mean, you drop the first 2 rounds in a 5-round MMA fight, you have to win the next 3 or you lose. So I've been I've been thinking a little bit about this, and I may have mentioned this last week, but there was a thing about watching Rose when she fought Jessica Andrade both times, where I mentioned already, when I talked about that, I just think over 5 rounds, Andrade just gets to Rose too consistently down the stretch. At this point in her career, one, I don't think flyweight is the best fit for Rose Namajunas. I don't think she has the punching power to make the most of her style. You really need to have some pop when you fight the way she does. And at flyweight, I just don't think she has it. Um, whether that's her losing a little bit, whether that's her opponents being more durable, I couldn't, some combination of the two. But the pop on her shots is just not what it was at strawweight, and it diminishes the efficacy of her game. More to that point, I feel like we've reached the place in Rose's career trajectory where she needs to make a significant style adjustment because what she's doing now, what she's doing just breaks down over 5 rounds. Her game does not sustain over the course of 25 minutes. I think she would win almost any 3-round fight. You put her in for 3 rounds against almost anyone in that division, she's probably going to win the first 2 rounds and lose the third. But that's not a big deal when you only have 3 rounds. When she has to win 3 rounds of 5, I mean, even in some of her other strawweight title fights, she kind of eked out a few of those decisions. Um, and that's right now. I don't think her style is sustainable. Whether that's an energy thing, whether that's a weight class thing, but I think it's just very energy intensive. It requires a lot of mental focus, and especially at flyweight, her offensive potency is diminished. So even the openings that her style does create don't have the same effect. She needs to change something up, and she's not going to. Well, I shouldn't be that definitive. Yeah, I find it unlikely that she's going to. Yeah, that's just kind of where I am with Rose at this point. I don't think this is the best fit for her divisionally, and I don't think that she's going to make the necessary changes to be very successful in this weight class, which is not. Look, she's only 2-2 in the weight class. Like, it's not like she's getting blown out of the water, but people have started to figure out her game. Even at its best, people have kind of got a handle on it. And as it starts to break down and slow down over the course of a fight, she's getting further and further behind the 8 ball the deeper you go into a fight. And that's just not a recipe for success. Good win for Blanchfield. She said she wants to fight Alexa Grasso. I think that's a perfectly fine fight. I don't know what you do with Namajunas. Her 2 wins in the weight class are, Amanda Hebos and Tracy Cortez. Those aren't bad wins, but there seems to be a clear ceiling on her in this weight class. And it is at the moment, that's the top 5, I think is I would not favor her to beat Alexa Grasso. Put it like that. 3 rounds might be tight. 5 rounds with Grasso, I don't think Namajunas wins. I don't give her much of a shot against Valentina. She already lost to Fior. But that 7 to 12 range, I think she can beat most of those girls. So I don't know where exactly she goes from here. It's just kind of a tough spot to. She's had a good career. I'm not trying to, eulogize her MMA career. I don't think she's going to retire tomorrow, but she's definitely in the kind of spot where non-trivial changes need to start being implemented, and I don't know if they will be. All right, the rest of this should go pretty quickly. Brengerson Ribeiro defeated Caio Machado via split decision, 29-28. This fight sucked. I mean, this fight really sucked. Jasmine Jasdavicius caught Ariane De Silva with a Darce choke, 228 to the third. This was an okay fight. Nice finish from Jasdavicius. At middleweight, Dustin Stoltzfus knocked out Marc-Andre Barrio, 428 to the first. Pretty decent takedown from Stoltzfus, then his passing game is really solid. Landed elbows from on top, Barrio bucked him out of mount. Scrambled up, we got some rock'em sock'em robots, but Stoltzfus landed the better punches. Landed one on the chin, dropped Barrio like a bad habit. Good stuff. I mentioned it before, but I need to reevaluate Stoltzfus a little bit. He's much better than his record leads you to believe. And Mike Malott defeated Trevin Giles via unanimous decision, 30-27 and 229-28. Not a great fight. I was left with the impression that Giles is the better fighter, believe it or not. His offensive output is so minimal. Like, if you land as many jabs as he landed, you should be able to build something off of it, and he just never started pulling the trigger consistently in that respect. Not a great fight. Ayman Zahabi defeated Pedro Munoz via unanimous decision, 30-27 and 229-28. Another one I'm not quite sure where they found a round for Munoz. Zahabi looked real good. His jab was working, just really, really good boxing. Neutralized a bit of Munoz's calf kicking game with some distance management and just active punches. Dragged Munoz all over that cage, chasing him. Really good, really solid performance from Ayman Zahabi. Charles Jourdain hit a really nice guillotine choke on Victor Henry, 3:43 of the second. I was a little bit cautious about Jourdain here at bantamweight, but looked good. Made weight. Seemed to have the pressure from Henry was clearly part of the game, and I think had some effect. But Henry's takedowns became just a touch predictable, and Jourdain, well, not just predictable, Jourdain will sell out for the guillotine. And Henry, I don't think, was fully prepared for that to be just a consistent thing. Certainly not as consistently as it was. Nice finish to this, actually. Jourdain gets it. It's single arm. Not single arm. It's not an arm in. Kind of the more the power guillotine, kind of like Cody McKenzie used to do it. But he grabs that as Henry gets a takedown. Henry gets a takedown technically towards side control on the safe side, but so you think the choke becomes difficult to finish. It's more difficult this way. But Jourdain used his bottom leg, the one closest to Henry, to grab, kind of call it the empty half guard, and he was able to get it over Henry's legs and stop him from actually scooting his hips and his whole body around to be perpendicular to the choke, because that's what takes away the pressure. When Henry couldn't move his lower body around to adjust the angle, he's kind of stuck. He winds up tapping. Nice finish to the choke from Jourdain there. Yusuf Zalal with an arm triangle over Jack Shore, 59 seconds of the second round. Zalal hit a sweet stepping knee to Shore to drop him, and then got on top and was able to find enough to find the arm triangle. Yusuf Zalal is looking real sharp. He is really, really... it's a shame his first UFC run went the way it did. This is the point when he should have got here the first time. Like, this is the level of skill and experience that you want when you get to the UFC, not when you have to fight your way back to the UFC. Alexander Romanov defeated Rodrigo Nascimento via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the boards. This fight sucked. Sari City defeated Garrett Armfield via split decision, 29-28. I scored this for Armfield, but the second round was kind of close enough that I'm not up in arms over this. City thought he lost, for whatever that's worth. Bantamweight, Cody Gibson defeated Chad Anheliger via unanimous decision, 2:30-27 and a 30-26. I was 30-26. I thought Gibson got a 10-8 second. Just dominant wrestling. I wonder if Anheliger shouldn't consider a move to flyweight. I don't know. Maybe he's done that before and he just can't make it, but he's a fairly small bantamweight, and I wonder if that weight class shift wouldn't benefit him. And kicking everything off, Jamie Lynn Horth defeated Ivana Petrovic via split decision. There's a 29-28 each way, and then a 30-27 for Horth that I don't agree with. Giving Horth the first seems like a no-no, honestly. Giving her 2 and 3 is fine. But she did not win that first round. Anyway, those were the fights. Yeah, I already mentioned. No fight of the night. Performances went to everyone who got a finish. So Jasmine Jasdavicius, Dustin Stoltzfus, Charles Jordan, and Yusuf Zalal. I think they should have thrown a bonus Brandon Moreno's way because his performance overall here was definitely bonus worthy. He performed very, very well. His performance saved this card, if we're being honest. Yeah, because the rest of it, precious little to actually care about. Full report, MMAZona411mania.com. Y'all know the drill. Stop by over there. Give it a read. I always appreciate it. All right. Let's move on then, shall we? UFC on ESPN Plus 105. We're back in the warehouse. And I need a few things here. Sorry, guys. Let's find the odds. And there we go. And a few of these guys I need Tapology for. So, main event. I already mentioned it and I kind of dogged it, but it's because I don't think it's a good main event. Neil Magny, who's been with the UFC for a dog's age, it seems. I mean, just for the record, Magny's 37, but he's got 41 fights, and he's been with the UFC since 2013. And he's got a lot of fights in the UFC. How many? I don't want to count. Hang on. This will make it easier. He's got 33 fights in the UFC. That is just a little bit ridiculous. And I don't mean that as a giant negative. I really don't. But that is a ridiculous amount of longevity. He's been trading wins and losses recently. In fairness to the losses, it's Shavkat Rakhmonov, Gilbert Burns, Ian Gary, and Michael Morales. Those are all solid-ish fighters. I'm still not completely sold on Gary, which is weird, but I mean, Shavkat's probably the next champion. More on that later. Burns is still Gilbert Burns. Malott was giving him the business before Malott just gassed and then collapsed at the end of the third. And yeah, Morales did kind of a number on him. Jeez, that was just in August. Meanwhile, Carlos Prates has kind of become the new hotness at welterweight. 20-6, 3-0 in the UFC with 3 bonuses, all of them finishes. This is a really tough kind of litmus test for Prates. Magny is clearly on the downside, but he still provides a stern test. I don't think at if this were the Neil Magny of like 3 years ago, and this was the same, like I might actually be inclined to pick Magny to just kind of deal with some of what Prochess offers, and then clinch him, drag it out, make it ugly. But 5 rounds with Prochess is that's so much time to try and avoid the damage that he brings. And Magny's a little bit compromised at this point. Yeah, no problems going with Prochess, personally. Yeah, he's a big favorite. Okay, if this were a 3-round fight, I'd say that we're playing with some fire there. And again, Prochess might just gas out over five. I don't know. Look, just plus 400 or something on Magny. I don't know. That still feels a little steep to me, but I don't know. I might not be fully cognizant of just how much Magny has declined. But I am very, very aware of how good Prochess is. Bantamweight co-main event. So that's a fine fight, Magny and Prochess. It's just not a very good main event. Co-main event, Cody Garbrandt and Miles Johns. Cody Garbrandt back at bantamweight. Okay, he actually returned to bantamweight a little bit ago. He only had the one flyweight fight and just went nope. So he came back to bantamweight in 23, beat Trevin Johns, beat Brian Kelleher, and then earlier this year, Davis and Figueiredo kind of handled him. Garbrandt's such a weird guy to try and get a handle on because a lot of his skills are so very good. Johns has a pretty good UFC record. He's only lost to Mario Bautista and John Castaneda. His last several fights, he's beaten Vince Morales, had a no contest with Dan Argueta, beat Cody Gibson, beat Douglas Silva de Andrade. In terms of name value, this is pretty easily the biggest name he's ever fought. Johns is a pretty good fighter, but he's another guy with really limited output. Garbrandt's going to put that to the test. I'm not saying you can't fight a safeties style low activity fight against Cody Garbrandt, but you have to make him fight you that way to make it really work. And I don't know that Johns is good enough to force Cody into that kind of a fight. I do wonder just how compromised Cody Garbrandt is at this point. Because his chin's a little bit of a question mark, and Johns has okay power. The odds are a little bit with Johns. I'm actually going to go with Garbrandt. I may feel very foolish about this, but here's the thing. I don't think Johns has the cardio to really wrestle Cody consistently for 3 rounds. Johns should be able to avoid most of the big exchanges, but I just don't know that his defense is good enough to really avoid that unless he just completely eschews any contact. So I'll go with Garbrandt. Not very confident in that one. Women's strawweight, we have Karolina Kowalkiewicz and Denise Gomes. Gomes, couple of losses in the UFC to Loma Lookboonmee and Angela Hill. She beat Eduardo Mora her last time out, split decision. I don't remember how I scored that. Gomes, let's see, 9-3, 3-2 in the UFC. Her first two wins when she beat Bruna Brazil and Yasmin Jauregui, she showed off pretty decent power. She's a little short. She's only 5'2". It's a reach. 63 inches of reach. Carolina, by contrast, Carolina's only 5'3". Why do I have this vision in my head of Gomes being a lot shorter? Because she's fought some bigger strawweights, I think. Carolina lost to Yasmin Lucindo her last time out. That broke a surprisingly effective 4-fight winning streak. Kovalkiewicz is also north of 40. Or, sorry, she just turned 39. The odds like Gomes. Let me go with the odds on this one. I don't feel confident in that, but how heavily are they with her? Okay. I don't mind leaning Gomes, but if you're like Kovalkiewicz's chin has been touched a few times in the past, but like plus 300 or more on Kovalkiewicz, that I think is asking for trouble. I think Gomes is largely unproven against someone as seasoned as Kovalkiewicz, and potentially having to pay out plus 330 or so on Kovalkiewicz, that feels like asking for trouble. All right, next up, bantamweight Ricky Turcios and Bernardo Sopai. I do not have a handle on Ricky Turcios. He's 12-4. He's had some good fights. He's 2-2 in the UFC. He's got choked out by Raul Rosas in his last time out. Had a decent enough win over Kevin Natividad, but his fight with Amin Zahabi is one of the weirdest things you'll ever see. So I don't have a handle on him. He is all over the place. Sopai, 11-3. Had a tough UFC debut against Vinicius Oliveira. Good old lock dog. He actually did pretty well throughout the course of that fight, but he just got worn down and then caught with that vicious flying knee in the third. Right near the end of the fight, actually. Two fights fall through since then? That's unfortunate. I just don't have a feel for Turcios, and that's kind of throwing me off here. I'm actually going to go with Sopai. There's a fair amount of what he did in his debut that I think was pretty solid, and as I mentioned, if Turcios is on, he's a handful, and he can absolutely win this fight. But if I'm just like having to make a prediction, I don't know about the guy, and that's just a weird place to be in. Middleweight, we have Gerald Meerschaert and Renier de Ridder, the former two-weight world champion from ONE. He left that organization, fought for UAE Warriors back in July. Yeah, he had a good streak going. He had a really nice inverted triangle choke, actually, a couple of years ago. But then he ran into he moved up in weight and fought Anatoly Malikin at So he had their middleweight belt, which is 205, because one is weird. He went up to 225, lost to Anatoly Malakin. Malakin then came down to 205. Wait, did he? Yeah, he did have both of them because he beat Ong Lashong to win the 225 one. Then just only defended the middleweight one twice. Then yeah, Malakin beat him twice at both weight classes. He left. He got a pretty decent win at back in July, and now is making his way to the UFC. So he's I expect to see some fun grappling out of this one, actually. Both guys, that is kind of their preferred methodology of fighting. Meerschaert is a pretty tough veteran at this point. Uh, beat Brian Barberena and then Edmund Shabazian. Not Shabazian win, man. I think this is De Ridder, personally, but uh, you know what? This is actually one of the more interesting fights on this card because I'm curious to see how De Ridder looks. But yeah, if there's something else on this card I really kind of want to see play out, that's actually that this might be the most intriguing fight on the whole card for me personally. Strawweight next, Luana Pinheiro and Jillian Robertson. Pinheiro had a pretty decent-ish run going, but then back-to-back losses to Amanda Hebos and Angela Hill. That's a rough spot to be in. Robertson at strawweight he's looked pretty solid actually. Only losing to Tabitha Ricci. Robertson is kind of past the point of like making a serious run, but I think you would be. But this definitely feels like a winnable fight for her. Let me find the odds. I'm gonna pick Robertson anyway, just because that's kind of where I'm leaning. But do we have odds on this one? Yeah, okay, there they are. Yeah, odds agree with me. So we'll go with the old Savage there, Jillian Robertson. Okay, welterweight, Nicholas Dalby and Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. You know, a couple of years ago, this would have been a crackerjack of a fight. But dos Santos, he's coming off a loss to Randy Brown. He didn't look all that great against Renat Fakhretdinov. I can't remember if I thought he won the Abubakar Nurmagomedov fight. I might have scored that one for him. He's just kind of that. He had a long layoff at one point. Did he, or is he the one who's been just too consistent? Yeah, these two actually fought back in 2015, and Dos Santos won a split decision. It was his UFC debut. Or sorry, Dalby won the split decision. Excuse me, I misread that. That was actually a pretty decent fight from both guys, if memory serves. He went on a good winning streak, but the loss to Li Jingliang, I think, is the one that kind of upset the apple cart of Dos Santos here. Because he got wins after that, but he's just... So, this is not a bad fight. Dalby's looked actually pretty solid since returning to the UFC. Only losses are he lost to Tim Means, a decision. Had a 4-fight winning streak, including a really nice stoppage win over Gabriel Bonfim. Lost a split decision to Renat Fakhretdinov his last time out. That I think most people kind of. I remember I might have scored that for Fakhretdinov, but I don't remember exactly how I scored that one. A lot of people thought Dalby won, and Dalby certainly made a very, very good account of himself. So not a bad fight here. 9 years later, these two guys are still here, ready to go at it. I don't know how confident I can be picking Dos Santos at this point is part of the problem. This is a real close one. Most places have this pick 'em. I'm actually going to go with Dalby. I think Zaleski has I think he's slipped a little bit, and he's been in the UFC for a while, and he has kept a fairly consistent schedule, so that's going to happen. Middleweight, we have Mansour Abdul Malik against Dushko Todorovic. Todorovic, let's see, had the knee injury against Christian Leroy Duncan. That was really unfortunate. That was March of last year, so he's been out for a bit. He beat Jordan right before that, had the loss to Chidi and Jaquani, been a little bit up and down. He's returning from the knee injury. That's certainly something to consider. Abdul Malik, 6-0. Let's see, last seen on the Contender Series. Oh boy. So this is a gentleman with all finishes. All of them in the first round except his Contender Series fight. I am always leery of guys with this record. Not because they're bad, but because this just reeks of untested. And those guys are that's always a tricky thing to kind of parse out. The odds really like Abdul Malik. If he wasn't coming off of the injury layoff, I actually might go with Todorovic here, but I'll agree with I'll go with the odds. You know, somebody with this kind of a record, the UFC also tries to give them slightly favorable fights the first time or two out. Welterweight, Matthew Semmelsberger and Charles Radke. That's not going to jump off the page at anyone, but that actually might have some potential. Semmelsberger, unfortunately, on a 3-fight losing streak, lost to Jeremiah Wells, Urosh Medic, and Preston Parsons. Radke coming off of a loss to Carlos Praches. Praches hit him with a knee to the liver that instantly folded him up like a lawn chair. He acted like he'd been stabbed. He'd gone 2-0 in the UFC before that. I mean, beating Blood Diamond and then Gilbert Urbina, okay. But he'll probably get the rebound here. Semmelsberger is... That guy hits pretty hard, but his delivery system is questionable. His ability to get up when taken down is a little bit questionable, and his cardio is iffy. So, Radke seems like a okay pick there. See, Cody Stamen and Damon Blackshear. Stamen, 2-5 in his last 7. Okay, some of those fights, like Jimmy Rivera in 2020 was still pretty good. Then Merab Dvalishvili. I mean, Merab's only the champion now. Then Said Nurmagomedov. Beat Eddie Wineland. Beat Luan Lacerda. Lost to Douglas Silva de Andrade. And then lost to Taylor Lapilus. Lapilus is pretty good. The D. Silva there loss is the one that kind of stands out. Like, that doesn't quite belong. But Blackshear, 14-7-1. 2-fight losing streak. 2-3-1 in the UFC. The 2-fight losing streak is to Mario Bautista and Montel Jackson. This might be win or go home for Stamen. Blackshear's a pretty good favorite. Jeez. Am I misremembering something about this guy? There's a physical component here. Hang on. Blackshear's 5'10" for bantamweight. That's big. 72-inch reach. Stamen 5'6", 64.5 inches of reach. Okay, that's a big part of the component here. And you know what? With those dimensions in his favor, yeah, I'll go with Blackshear. Okay, what do we got next? Melissa Mullins, who the UFC really wanted to be something. And Claudia Segula. There's no way that's how it's pronounced because she's I don't mean this uncharitably, but she's Polish. So there is an accent there that I am just not aware of. Mullins 6-1, 1-1 in the UFC. She had an okay debut against Irina Alekseeva. Then Nora Cornolle stopped her in the second round. That was a rough fight for Mullins. So she's getting kind of a rebound here. Yeah, Seguya? Segua? That L with that accent, I think, normally makes the W, or the woo. Um, so there's no way I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize if I have just butchered that. I will try to do better after I hear what's pronounced correctly. Anyway, she is 4-1. There's some bare knuckle MMA fights as well. Hang on. 4-1. Sorry, 6-1 overall. Um, yeah, 6-fight winning streak actually. Lost her professional debut. Undefeated since then. Feels like they're trying to give Mullins a bit of a bounce back after her previous loss. I'll go ahead and agree with that being the most likely outcome, but Mullins is one of those people that I kind of just half root against because I know it upsets people in the UFC. Bantamweight next, Gaston Bolaños and Cortavias Romius. All right, let me take a look at these two guys. So Bolaños is from Peru, 7-4, 1-1 in the UFC. Won his debut against Darren Phillips, lost to Marcus McGee his last time out. McGee's pretty good. Romius, yeah, there's no N there. Yeah, okay, dude, his fighter nickname is Are You Not Entertained? Um, okay. 2-fight winning streak coming into his UFC debut. I don't know enough about these guys. I'm just going to go with the favorite. Favorite is Romius. Sure. I don't know enough about either of them. And kicking everything off, we have Tresean Gore and Antonio Tricoli. Okay. Gore, 4-2. 1-2 in the UFC. Is coming off a win. He beat Josh Fremd in October of 22. He was supposed to fight Bo Nickel, and he probably dodged a bullet there because I think Nickel would have handled him. Also had a fight fallout with AJ Dobson, so that's a 2-year plus layoff. I mean, Tricoli is also just like not very good. 12-4. Lost his UFC debut to Shara Magomedov. He looked very poor in that outing. And again, Gore just kind of doesn't look good at all. Odds are a little bit with Gore. I understand that after just how poor Tricoli looked against Shara Magomedov, but let me go with Gore. Actually, not Gore. Sorry, let me go with Tricoli. Um, yeah, I might be wrong on that, but I think he performs better than he did his last time out, and that layoff for Gore is just a big old red flag for me. All right, so that's what we've got. Saturday, MMA Zone to 411mania.com. Stop by, say hello. I always appreciate it. I will have the situation per usual. Okay. Didn't expect that to be about an hour, but here we go. Let's move on then, shall we? And we'll just try to bang this out. So, big news. Belal Muhammad out of UFC 310, the fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov. He had a non-trivial bone infection in one of his toes. I can make a joke, but I won't because those are just not pleasant to deal with. So hopeful. Here's the only thing I'm going to say about this. This is just an optics thing. This is not me throwing. I'm not trying to impugn Belal Muhammad. Okay, I'm not trying to insult the man. Hopefully he's able to recover from this because when you're in the hospital for a bone infection and he was like that's a serious thing. So hopefully he can recover. But in the aftermath of him winning the belt, he said in some interview that he wanted to remain active and he wanted the Alex Pereira schedule. Well, that lasted all of what? 6 weeks before I'm not trying to, as I said, I'm not trying to be insulting. I'm really not. That's just an observation. If you put that out there into the world, when you fail to live up to it, there's going to be some blowback. There just is. And I don't know. He's now saying no, there will not be an interim title fight, buddy. You get no say in the matter. I don't know what you think that belt does for you when it comes to how you negotiate with the UFC, but the answer is very little. If the UFC wants an interim belt, they'll make an interim belt. They will not consult you about it. They don't care what you think. I don't know if they will or not. Their options are kind of limited. So, not too long after that news broke, they announced that the last event of the year for the UFC in Tampa Bay, it's a fight night, will be headlined by Ian Machado Gary and Joaquin Buckley, who would be two of the people whose names I would think would get thrown around as who could we toss in there with Shavkat now that Belal's out. Those two would be near the top of that list. And now they're fighting each other, headlining a different event, so they're probably not going to blow that up. That leaves, to my way of thinking, three serious options. I'm assuming they're going to try and keep that as the main event. First of all, Shavkat against somebody. If they're going to do that, then there's going to be an interim title, in all probability. And I don't love those if the champ's not going to be out for a long time, but I also don't care enough to be upset about it at this point. It's a way. Do I think interim belts largely lost their meaning because of the UFC's overuse of them? 1,000,000%. But it's a way for fighters to get a little bit more money, so I'll deal with it. But if they want to keep Shavkat in the main event, I assume there's going to be an interim title. There would not be much reason to strip Belal Muhammad of the belt unless there are serious complications, which, while not outside the realm of possibility, seem unlikely. So, if you want to keep the interim belt, if you want to put an interim belt on the line, there are three choices, I believe. And I know which one I'd prefer, but The options go as follows to my mind. Leon Edwards, former champion. Kamaru Usman on a 3-fight losing streak. Or Jack Della Maddalena. Now, I know Jack Della Maddalena had some kind of health issue not too long ago. But that caused his previous fight to fall apart. He should be on the table. Let me just put it that way. He should be a consideration. I don't, and honestly, that's the one I'm most interested in. Of all those permutations, personally, Rachmanov and Jack Della is the one I am most interested in watching. I'm not interested in watching Kamaru Usman at welterweight at this point. It's pretty clear that a chunk of his physical skills have deteriorated, and I don't think he deserves a title shot, even an interim one. Edwards, I don't think had necessarily the body of work to warrant an immediate rematch with Belal, but a fight with him and Rachmanov, if he gets that win, then that's his only way for his next fight to be for the belt, I think, if you're Edwards, is to beat Rachmanov and to then say to be the interim champion to force the issue. So, no word yet on what they're actually going to do, but that event is coming up fairly quickly, and they will have to find something for it, because that was not a one-fight card. Because, again, we're talking, 310. So, T-Mobile, I'm not saying you couldn't main event with Alexandre Pantoja and Kai Asakura, but if you're trying to sell pay-per-views, it's deeply unfortunate that Pantoja is not getting his flowers yet, because that man has been in some tremendous fights. But you've got a guy who is unknown to the U.S. MMA audience in Asakura. He's very good, but you have to have watched Ryzen and One to have mostly Ryzen to really to have gotten a feel for the fact that he's actually pretty darn good. He hasn't fought in almost a year. Yeah, December of 23. And if you didn't watch Ryzen, you don't really know anything about him. But he's beaten some really talented guys. That's just a hard sell. Those two as your pay-per-view main event, it's just a hard sell. So they're going to try and find something. Not sure what else. That's not a one-fight card, but you really want something else at the top that was like Rachmanov and Belal. It was like, you know what? Yeah. Because the rest of that card right now is Cyril Gane and Alexander Volkov, which is a rematch. Vicente Luque and Nick Diaz for some reason. Movsar Evloev and Aljamain Sterling, which I don't hate, but that's not moving. That's not moving the product. That's kind of it. They announced actually for that same card apparently Nate Landwehr and the Korean Superboy Doo Ho Choi. That'll be fun for as long as it lasts. Actually, that is a fan-friendly fight if ever there was one. So not sure what's up with that. We'll keep an eye out for who or what winds up filling in for that main event. But yeah, between Gary and hang on just a second. Yeah, UFC on ESPN 63, December 14th. That's Gary and Buckley. So with those two out of the running, the options for a potential interim title fight are limited. Belal getting pissy about, what do you mean there's an interim belt? Well, the UFC does what they want to do about this stuff. My man, you're still the full champion unless they strip you of it. And frankly, that would be uncalled for unless there's a major health complication or Belal becomes too much of a pain for them to deal with. Neither of which I see happening, but who knows? I've been wrong before about stuff like that. All right, other news. Only thing I've written down, then we'll check the old X machine. Max Holloway, doing the YouTube clickbaity title, did the major announcement, time to close the chapter, and announced that he's just moving to lightweight full time. He's done at 145 and is ready to move up to lightweight. I think that's the right move for him at this point. There was nothing left for him at featherweight. He's already, how you figure out like him versus Aldo versus Volk for the best featherweight ever, the greatest featherweight champion. That's a hard thing to untangle. And I know all the old heads like Aldo because of all of his WEC stuff. Like, I was there for that, man. I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm saying when he got stopped by Max twice, and all I'm talking about is his featherweight run. The fact that Aldo had a second career down at bantamweight for as long as he did, and is like still there, like that's a fairly remarkable piece of business. But just at featherweight, when he gets stopped by Max twice and blanked by Volkanovski, like it does hurt the argument just a little bit. Max had a better title run than Volk, I think, but Volk also beat Max 3 times. There's a lot of trying to untangle that comes down to personal preference. But when you're in that conversation, I have nothing but respect for Max. So him up at lightweight to kind of start the tail end of his career. I said last week, give me a rematch between him and Charles Oliveira because like 8 years ago, give or take, when they had their fight at featherweight, I was really looking forward to that one. And then Oliveira had that neck injury flare up very quickly, and unfortunate. But give me that rematch. You could do him and Chandler. Poirier's definitely an option. Max at lightweight just breathes a little bit of life into his career, and there's some fun fights that can be made up there. So, good move for Max. I mean, I'm gonna be sad when Max retires, but right move for him ultimately, I think. So, all right, that's what I've got written down for news. Let me check the old social medias and see if anything crazy is broken. If not, we will do plugs and we will get out of here. Nope, nothing new there on the MMA front at least. So, plugs. I'm fairly off this week actually. No Damn You Hollywood on Monday. It's going to be an on trial for Pearl Harbor. That's going to be Mark and Andrew. Bless. I would have forgiven Mark for a lot, but he made his kids watch Pearl Harbor with him, and that's just a traumatic experience, man. That's just bad. That's just bad. But they'll have fun talking about it, so that'll be a thing. WWE SmackDown on Friday, UFC event on Saturday. That's all the usual stuff. Yeah, next week we're back here to review UFC on ESPN Plus 105. We will preview UFC 310, 309. I may not be able to cover 309 live. I've got to double check something for that Saturday, so I should know one way or the other next week when I preview it if I'll be covering it or not, so stay tuned for that. If not, I will watch it and do some kind of a write-up for it, so don't worry about that. For those of you that use my coverage to stay up to date on the events, I just don't think I'll be able to do that one live. My next Saturday is looking fairly booked at the moment, so yeah. I'd rather it had not happened on a pay-per-view, but I can't control the scheduling of either the UFC's events or, as it happens, my scheduling for the event this Saturday. So, oh well. It's not the first event I've missed. I haven't missed a lot though. It's been a minute since I've missed one. Straight up missed one start to finish. So, I don't know. We'll see. I'll have some kind of a write-up for it after the fact, one way or the other. So, It might have to wait until Sunday, maybe, but I will get something out for you guys about that. I promise you that. All right. That's all for me this week. Thank you all very, very much for being here. I appreciate the heck out of you. As always, stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.